Today we're going to try to study Proverbs chapter 19. And Proverbs 19 is pretty much a continuous thought of 17, 18, and now 19. It's the parallelisms that we've talked about over and over. Solomon chooses words in chapter 19 that gives us some insight of maybe what he was thinking when he was living. And this particular chapter shows a lot of practicality for us today, as did 18 and 17. You know, we talked about being a friend last week, and how do we actually do that? And we talked about wisdom, and that's been the general theme the whole book. So, chapter 19 is, it's, I don't want to sound redundant, but it is redundant. I don't know that that's a bad word necessarily. Maybe a better way to describe it is emphasis or repetition, because he's telling us again the same thing. But Proverbs 19, we can kind of break it down into three sections. 1 through 7 is teaching us about personal integrity and wealth. Better to be honest and poor than rich and dishonest. And then chapter 19, verses 8 through 21, teaches us the value of wisdom and the severe or the disastrous results of not listening to it, not adhering to the wisdom. It also teaches about self-control again. It teaches that we have that choice to do the right thing. It talks again about understanding, knowledge, and the wisdom. And then as the chapter concludes, 22 through 29, it is the respect for God's will and the consequences for not obeying it. So that's kind of what chapter 19 is going to do for us. And let's just read it, and then we'll talk about it of the few verses as we go through. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who preserves his lips and is a fool. Also, it is not good for his soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet. The foolishness of a man twists his way, and the heart frets against the Lord. Wealth makes many friends, but the poor is separated from his friend. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. Many entreat the favor of the nobility, and every man is a friend to one who gives gifts. All the brothers of the poor hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He may pursue them with words, yet they abandon him. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall perish. Luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a servant to rule over the princess. The desertion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. The king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like the dew on the grass. A foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. Houses and riches are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. He who keeps the commandment keeps his soul, but he who is careless of his ways will die. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. Chasten your son while there is hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction. A man of great wrath will suffer punishment, for if you rescue him, he will have to do it again. Listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your later days. There are many plans in a man's heart, nevertheless the Lord's counsel, that will stand. What is a desire in a man in kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar? The fear of the Lord lends to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will become wary. Rebuke one who has understanding, and he will discern knowledge. He who mistreats his father and chases away his mother is a son who causes shame and brings reproach. Cease listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A disreputable witness scorns justice, and the mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. Judgments are prepared for scoffers, and beatings for the backs of fools. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Yes, sir.
The God that made us directed the Holy Spirit to write that, knowing that human beings can do the things that He's asked us to do, and to stay away from those that He's told us to stay away from.
Right.
I think, telling us you're capable. I made you. That is a fabulous chapter about integrity.
It really is. Clyde said that the God that made us, through Solomon, has given us the instruction and the ability to do so. And God says you can do it because I made you. And that's it. We can do it. We can choose to be in a situation to do right or wrong, right? Is it always a choice? It is always a choice. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity. The one who preserves his lips as a fool. Also is not good for his soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet. So what's integrity? Verse 1 says, a man with integrity. What does that word mean?
Character, isn't it?
Clyde says it's your character. It is good character. Honest and reliable. Have you ever heard the saying, well, you can take that to the bank? What does that mean? Trusting. Robin tells me something and I say, he said it, you can take it to the bank, right? What are we going to do? It's just the way it is. Nothing else is an option. The integrity drives the decisions, right? Yes, sir, Dennis. Sure. Dennis gave credit to Larry McDuffie and said that all these things that we're supposed to be doing, all these good things, integrity is the, what word did you use? Adhesion, or the glue, the binding agent that keeps it all together. Because if you have integrity, all the other stuff is going to come pretty easy, right? If you're honest, maybe I shouldn't say easy, because it is work. But I think the decision is already made because the integrity is there, right? Are you going to cheat on your test? When was that decision made? Before you ever went in. Not because you didn't study the night before or been studying for 6 months because you knew this final was coming. The decision was made, well, I'm kind of lazy. It talks about that later on. So the decision was made, being prepared or not, integrity, right? So that's how chapter 19 starts. Notice verse 3. The foolishness of a man twists his way, and his heart frets against the Lord. What does the King James say, Clyde? Does it use the word twist his way?
Which verse is that?
Verse number 3.
No, it says the foolishness of a man
Perverts his way, or twist his way. He makes it negotiable based on what he wants, right? And his heart frets. What's the word fret mean? You ever fret about something? Worry. His heart frets against the Lord. It kind of gives me the picture of somebody wringing their hands. You know? Yes, ma'am. Miss Linda said that it also includes blaming someone else. I'm not going to take responsibility for this. I'm going to blame, in this case, God. My heart is against God. Yes. Carol says another way to describe this is anger, or right before the explosion, you are wrath. Is there a difference between wrath and angry? Maybe. Degrees, right? You can be angry, goes into wrath. I mean, that's when your face turns red, right? yeah. Light the fuse and the explosion happens, is what Claude said. So, if you think about integrity in verse 1, and now we're down in verse 3, and we're talking about the foolishness, and we're talking about frets against the Lord. What is he teaching us for today? What's the application for us this morning? What do we have to do? For one thing, we have to accept the responsibility for our actions. Right. His folly is his ruin. Can we choose destruction? Absolutely. That's what it's teaching us, right? So if we are talking about integrity, and now we're talking about the foolishness of a man does his own way, he twists it or perverts it, and then the next context in verse 5, he talks about a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. He says almost the same words again in verse 9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall what? So now Solomon is talking about integrity. He's talking about foolishness. And now he's talking about what? If you choose to lie, what's going to happen? He will not escape. David said it and others said it. Punishment, right? You will be punished for lying. What is a lie? I'm sorry, Clyde, would you repeat it? Anything except the truth, he said. That's a pretty good way of saying it.
You know, you go to court, you know, why do they have to put your hand on the Bible? They want to make sure something of authority is going to make you tell the truth under whatever circumstances you're in the court of law.
That's right.
That's really what we're saying.
Clyde referenced when you go to the court of law and you have to testify, you put your hand on the Bible, they're saying it has to be some kind of authority, right? They want it to be, you got to tell the truth. Not only do they say the truth, but it's what? The whole truth? Nothing but the truth? Why would you say nothing but the truth? Tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Covers it all. So in verse 5 and verse 9, he's talking about a liar that's going to be punished. What's the punishment? Exactly. Miss Barbara said it could be the consequences here on earth in a situation. A consequence of lying. But if you continue that behavior, separation from God, which is going to hell, which is torment, right? Any other comments or questions on this context? Again, verses 1 through 7 teaches us the integrity, the wealth versus foolishness versus choosing to do right and wrong. Yes, sir, Mickey. Oh, sure. Yes, sir. All right. Mickey said that it has become a plague on our society that we tend to get lied to every day. And he said God, by nature, hates sin, all forms of sin. But lies and foolishness were called out in the abomination. And it makes him sad that our society is that way. And I agree with that. In reverse, I had a situation happen Thursday of last week. I ran an estimate for an individual. He and his wife talked about it in June. Well, his system went down Thursday. Well, so he calls me, and he asked for an estimate. Actually, he didn't ask for the estimate. I thought he needed an estimate. I gave him another one, and we've had some changes in prices, and it was almost $1,000 more. And he simply asked, why is it more now than it was in June? I 100% forgot that I priced it to him in June. 100%. And I said, what did I quote you in June? And he gave me the number, and I sold it to him. We installed it, he paid us for it, and we went on about our business. I was thankful that he told me the truth, Because I'd have sold it to him at whatever number come out of his mouth. And I would have figured it out afterwards. But then I found the paperwork in my system on the computer that I quoted him exactly what he told me in June. He was honest as the day is long. And I was too, because I told him, I said, I apologize, but I forgot. You know, he could have very easily said $1,000 or $1,200 cheaper than what I quoted him, and I'd have sold it to him. And then my manager would have came to me and said, what are you doing? You know? That's not happening every day, is it, Mickey? But that concept is what Solomon is teaching, I think. The integrity. The integrity of him saying, hey, what happened? You quoted me this number in June, and me saying, yeah, you're right. Let's do it. I forgot. I don't make it a habit of forgetting things like that. I really don't. I don't know how it happened, but anyway. Verses 1 through 7, integrity, doing honest, being what you should be doing. Yes, Heather. Heather said that if you, we get offended sometimes when we hear the truth. As simple as we make a new recipe. Did you like that? Yeah, I loved it. Well, no, you don't. I can see it. It's hard for you to get it to your mouth. You don't like it. So we need to maybe toughen up a little bit in order, in that loving manner that they're giving us the truth, that we should receive it. That's a good point. You know, because the truth fears no questions, right? The fear of questions comes from, did I lie about that? I don't remember what I said. So the truth fears no questions. Yes, Jim.
Integrity is vital.
Sure. Jim said that integrity is vital. We have to be able to trust someone. And if we trust them and we hear the same thing from individuals over and over and over, to a point we become, I don't trust them. I don't depend on them. And it's very hard, right? So integrity is vital to our Christian life. I think that's what Solomon is saying. He said it in 16, 17, 18, and now 19. Yes. I thought you were talking about my microphone. Did you see me look down? But he basically said, we have to be the one that's trustworthy. I have to have the word that all of you believe. And you have to have the word that I believe. Right? Anything else? Yes, sir.
Comment there a minute ago. A long time ago, my dad told my brother and I, you tell the truth and you don't really remember what you said.
No, yeah. Clyde said that his dad told his brother and he that if you tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said. And that's the truth. And I'm glad I don't have to remember everything I said. I can't remember that I quoted a guy in June, you know. So chapter 19, 18 through 21 is now switching gears just a little bit And he's talking about the value of wisdom. And he's talking about the consequences of not obtaining it. Let's look at a few verses. It starts in verse 8. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. And then he talks about the false witness again. And then in verse 11, the desertion of a man makes him slow to anger. So the value of wisdom, he talks about it in verse 8, and he says, the teaching is, he who keeps understanding will find good, right? And now he skips down to verse 11, and he says, the desertion of a man. Discretion, sorry. How do you have discretion? Sir? Mr. George said, tell the truth. There's got to be good sense. Good sense or common sense. Yeah, common sense is not so common. Y'all know that, right? Clyde said you've got to consider the options. We got to consider the options. If we are trying to discern something, do we ask questions? We should. We very much should, because you know what? Truth what? Doesn't shy away from questions. So if we're trying to learn information, how do you learn? That's right. Absolutely. Yes. She said that it applies to us today. Think about road rage. We're all in traffic. Why do we have to take it out on that one person? Sometimes the words come out of my mouth. Well, what are you going to do with that half second, knucklehead? You know, and I pull up beside him at the red light, and maybe I wave or maybe I don't. But anyway, I try not to. That's kind of what we're being taught here. Yes, Miss Betty. A flower, common sense is a flower that does not grow in everyone's garden. I love it. That's great. And Miss Linda asked, the second half of verse 11, and his glory is to overlook a what? Transgression, a sin. An offense. Yeah. So, and we'll get to that based on our lack, we're slow to anger because we have information, and our slow to anger is going to make us overlook a sin. Now, not to say that we shouldn't try to correct the sin, but the correction is done and they move on, then we forget about it. Is that not what it's talking about? Because we can't overlook sin, but we can forgive the person and we can have that thought process to do better. Yes, Dennis. Absolutely. Dennis referenced the definition and the legal bounds of what we can choose within the parameters. What's the parameters? God is. God has given us what to choose. We've just got to do that. Yes, ma'am. she referenced in Corinthians, the New Testament application would be the little bitty things. Why are you taking them to court? Why don't you work it out between the two of you instead of bringing everybody involved? The little things. That's a parallel to what is being taught by Solomon. That's a very good point. Look at verse 20. Listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days. Can you stop learning? Obviously, if there's something going on that you're not mentally capable of, we understand that. But just on a day-to-day basis, if you can think about it, you can learn, right? That's what he's teaching in this context. The value of wisdom and the consequences of not listening to it. Listen to the counsel and receive instruction. How would we say that today? How do we apply that to our lives today? What is counsel? Advice. Making a difference between good and evil. So once we hear the counsel or advice, what's the next step? You have to accept it. To receive counsel, and sometimes I overlook the small words in the Bible in our English translation, but the "and" here is important. Because you have the counsel, you have the advice, and instruction, right? So what does instruction do? Does it not change? Yes. It teaches you the steps. Right. Stealing third base is okay, but stealing signs is not. Why would you watch baseball anyway? Oh, I know. Yeah. Dennis says that the counsel is a formal advice. You know, it is basically legal. But there's a word in there that we've left out, and I kind of did it intentionally. Counsel and receive instruction. Jim, that stove is hot. Don't touch it. Where's the advice? That's the advice, right? Brian, don't go in the street. You'll get run over. That's the advice, right? What happens when Jim puts his hand on that hot plate? He goes, ow, that was hot. And the temptation is, told you so. But what do? We go find the aloe and we find the bandages and we find some cold water and we try to make it right. So he did not receive the information. He refused counsel. Brian, don't go in the street. Jim tells me don't go in the street. And I go get in the street and somebody hits me and I break my leg. He said, don't look over and go, told you so. I would. He probably should. That's a good point. She said that counsel is sitting down and advice is talking, instruction is hands-on learning.
In a way, counsel is from someone who's done it before, or experienced it before, or has they're using their knowledge to counsel.
Oh, really? Go ahead. Sorry.
But you're going to read the instruction. You're going to receive the instruction.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you're right. Do you read them before you start the task? You read them all the way through, and then you go back and you read them as you do each step. Okay. I am so proud of him. I don't do that. I'm sorry. I need to receive instruction. I know. But Jim said basically the counsel is you talking to someone that has the experience, someone that has lived it probably. And the instructions are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E, F. It gets you to a point that you can go step by step. To me, verse 20 encompasses the whole chapter of 19. Because it talks about the integrity, it talks about the wisdom, it talks about the understanding, it talks about the knowledge, it talks about the consequences. In basically 4 words. Counsel and receive instruction. Right? So if you were going to summarize chapter 19, that's where I'd put it. Any other questions on that particular section? And I know we had our plow very high and we can't get down in there. But the latter part of the chapter, verses 22 through the end of the chapter 29, is talking about respect for God's will. How do you have respect? Respect would be Brian listening to Jim when he says, don't go on the road. How does Jim know for me not to go on the road? He probably went in the road. He probably had some experience. He's probably had counsel from someone else.
Verse 27 gives the reason for verse 20.
Yes, that's right. Miss Linda says verse 27 gives us the reason. Cease listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. Quit listening, and you're going to go further and further and further and further away. So, look at verse 24. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl. The original context basically gives us the impression that it's a hand and you put it in your bosom. You hide it and you're too lazy to pull it out to eat. I don't understand that laziness at that level. Y'all know my affection for food, right? How can somebody be so lazy that they won't eat? Well, I'd eat if you'd put it in my mouth, you know. That's kind of what he's saying, isn't it? I mean, I learned to do a lot of things left-handed when I was in high school because I broke 3 of my fingers on my right hand. They taped them up and told me I couldn't do anything, and I learned to eat left-handed. It's the first thing I did. Why do you do that? Notice what the end of the verse says. And will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Not as so much. Yeah, I don't think I can get the bowl, the spoon, the food to my mouth. I just don't want to do it. Laziness. And then, like Sister Linda said, verse 27, cease listening. What happens when you stop listening? You stray from the words of knowledge. So if we're listening and we're always trying to think and we always are trying to do what God says, we're never going to be in a situation that we stop listening. Y'all heard me say it publicly. My daughter calls me out sometimes and she goes, Brian, are you listening? Why does she say Brian? I mean, because I'm not looking at her. If I'm not looking at people, probably not listening to you. I don't mean it, but I've stopped listening, right? Yes, ma'am. Big difference between hearing and listening. Okay, all the little people are coming in and the young ones. I greatly appreciate your comments and your attention. We will continue next week, good Lord willing. Thank you.